Welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast. My name is Phil Crimmins. I'm covering for Luke today. He's unavailable today, and also I will be unavailable next week. So 2 weeks in a row of me. Apologies for those of you who were hoping to hear Luke's dulcet tones. He does have such a nice speaking voice, and I unfortunately have this rather American voice. But not to worry, we'll cover some really interesting topics that you guys provided so that from that angle, it really doesn't matter who's talking about it because you guys give us such great comments and questions each week that are quite intellectually stimulating if you are a Mandarin learner. And that's what the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast is all about. We're interacting with the people who are really engaging with learning Chinese on a micro level, but also at a large level. And what I mean by that is or a sort of a wide level. And what I mean by that is that we have lessons in our course that get very specific. They're talking about an individual character component, not even an individual Chinese character, just a component of that character. And we have lessons that relate to coming up with a mnemonic device that represents an individual pinyin letter. So we get really micro with our lessons. But what happens is that as you build up the micro pieces, you start to develop, sort of a foundation of a building of knowledge, and to some degree, this is literally true in your brain. Now, I'm no neuroscientist, this is all speculative, but, when you build up new sort of neural pathways from learning anything, from the moment you're born until you continue to grow and learn new things, there are structures in your brain. They're very small, they're microscopic, but they can create pathways for energy to move through and give that 1 or a 0 response that neurons are wont to do. And then, you add Chinese to it by getting at that micro level and saying, okay, here's a brand new thing that does relate to the building of Chinese. And we're going to connect it to the things that you already know in the form of imagining objects, imagining people, imagining places, imagining actions, memories, emotional memory, things that mattered a lot to you in your life that you will never forget. Well, if there's something that you'll never forget, that means there's a solid structure in your brain already. Now you can attach some Chinese to it. So a lot of what we do is help you search your own mind, which is a vast panoply of neural structures, and find the spot that is easiest to attach a new bit of information. And then what happens naturally over time is that Chinese starts to have its own structure in your brain. And then you'll see that you can go from knowing nothing about Chinese to knowing thousands of characters and to being able to speak to somebody and have a good back and forth conversation, which actually relates to the first comment that we're going to talk about today. But that's what the Mandarin Blueprint's all about. We bring in the questions and comments that come from either the micro lessons or the big breakthrough moments that people have, and we discuss them on the podcast. We try to give encouragement to people who might be feeling a little bit down on the journey because, if you're going to do anything, it's going to take years to complete. There's going to be moments where you feel a bit despondent, where you feel a bit of despair, like, am I going to make it this whole way up the mountain? But of course, when you can see that there are other people who are also on the journey that are having their breakthrough moments, then that can sometimes be enough to get you out of the depths and back into your progress. And these are just natural parts of the journey. That's why we want to have the Mandarin Blueprint community interacting with each other in this way. And Luke and I can be conduits for that sort of sharing of the journey. And, when you get to individual questions about a specific lesson, that's the type of thing that will pay it forward, because you leave a question on a lesson. We respond to it either during the week via a Loom video or a quick comment, or we talk about it on the podcast. It's leaving a little bit of gold, a little bit of a map for anybody else who's coming up the same path that you're coming up. So, I really do like the analogy of making a long journey up a mountain range, and, you leave a little something for the next person. You say, hey, here I got a little bit stuck. But maybe you won't if I leave you these instructions. And it's quite admirable how well people care. It's just people clearly care about whoever's going to come next, because a lot of the comments that are left aren't specifically something that is going to help them as an individual right now. It's just something that they recognize and they want to share it with other people. It's really, I admire so many of you for that. It's quite a wonderful thing to observe because it's selfless, you know? I mean, I suppose it's selfish in the way that you're making sure that you've solidified the knowledge for yourself by writing it out to someone, but it's mostly just a selfless act because, you know, you could just keep going and instead you go, okay, I'm going to leave this little nugget of wisdom, this nugget that I learned here in case somebody else in the future will benefit from it. And so that's why Luke and I will always be motivated to do this podcast as long as, you know, this is still our main focus in life, because we would feel like we're letting people down by not bringing this stuff up. So let's get into it a little bit today. But before we get into the actual comments and questions, I have some updates for you guys. So in the previous podcast, I had mentioned that we had all these things that were like almost done, and that I wanted to, you know, there's that state you can get into sometimes where you're just like frustrated because you have 4 or 5 projects that are almost done and you're not quite done yet. Well, it was almost like my saying that gave me a little bit of a pep talk, because last week I worked pretty hard, even for my relatively high standards in that department, and was able to finish up several things that needed to be done. So let's go through them and talk about how they're going to help you, whether you're on the course or not. If you're not on the course, you'll still find these updates to be interesting. But if you are in the course, these will be very helpful to you. So which order to take these in? How about I do it in the order that I finished them? So the first is that Phase 2 is now upgraded. And also there were some adjustments to Phase 1 in this. So Luke and I wanted to make Phase 2 more powerful and give you guys better solutions for learning Chinese vocabulary words. So as a reminder, the Mandarin Blueprint Method follows this structure. There's sort of the pre-phase, the prep phase, which is pronunciation mastery, learning all of the syllables of Mandarin Chinese and how to articulate them just like a native Mandarin speaker. We move that knowledge and the knowledge of pinyin into Phase 1, which focuses on characters and components for the most part. Now, there are 5 2-character words in Phase 1 that are very high frequency, but we don't focus too much on them. We just give you some hints and we provide you images for those. The main focus is characters and components. Now in Phase 2, you continue with your practice of characters and components. The whole course is accumulative, meaning that once you learn how to do something, you keep doing it, and then you learn an additional skill on top of that once you've spent enough time. So you enter Phase 2 around character 47. It's levels 7 through 12 of the course. And this is where we now give you even better instructions on how to learn compound words. Compound words, the definition of a compound word is pretty simple. It's just when there's more than one character and the characters maintain their meaning. So there's words like chocolate, 巧克力. Now, 巧克力 does not mean, it's not 3 characters who have different meanings combining to come to the understanding of the word chocolate. It's just imitating the English word, right? Chocolate, 巧克力, right? That being the case, that is not a compound word because those 3 characters aren't combining meanings. They're just imitating an English sound. And that's what we call a multiple syllable morpheme. There's only one morpheme, chocolate. That's it. But a word like there's a character, 桌, which means table. If I say 书桌 or 餐桌, those are compound words. Why? Because 书桌 means desk, the book table. 餐桌 means dinner table, the meal table, right? So you're taking the 2 characters and their meanings, combining them to create a new word. That is a compound word. Now, we perhaps didn't focus as much on this at the beginning because so many Chinese words are really obvious. Chinese, this is not the hardest layer of the language because if you know the characters, many words are just clear as day. Oh, the meal table. Well, that must be the dinner table. The book table, a desk. Wow. Half year, 半年, means wouldn't you know it, 6 months, right? Like, so there's a lot of words that are really obvious. So to some degree, we wanted to make sure that we had the harder layers of the language on lockdown. However, we then moved into phase 2 and said, all right, now that we have phase 1 and pronunciation mastery really well done, we're going to do phase 2 and make it even clearer. So there are some words that aren't as obvious, that aren't as on their face really clear. So what do you do to remember them? Well, we made a vocab mnemonics cheat sheet. We made 4 theoretical lessons called The Logic of Living Links. They're the first lesson in the first 4 levels of phase 2, and that's also where you can download the vocab mnemonics cheat sheet. And we also made all of the new vocabulary unlocked lessons. We reshot them and applied the techniques from the vocab mnemonics cheat sheet to give you several different ways to learn compound words. And these lessons are really good because we were kind of exhaustive with it. We were like, okay, you don't need to use all the techniques possible on every given word, but just for the sake of education, we went through the cheat sheet as much as possible for each one. We just said, okay, here's a new word that you're learning. You're learning the characters or the words 但是 and 只是, which mean but as a conjunction, but, and only 只是. And so how can you learn these words? And we exhaustively went through the list. Do they sound like anything? Do they trigger any memories for you? Are there any cultural tropes you can glean from to help you learn these? And so what naturally happens as a result of going through this is that you can sort of get the principles of how to do it and then learn from there. So I posted an announcement on phase 2, and if you are in any phase of the course except for phase 1. If you're in phase 1, then just keep going and you'll eventually reach these new lessons. But if you're in phase 2 or anywhere else in the course, I'd highly recommend going back and checking out these lessons because it will make learning new vocabulary words even easier. So that's the first update that is now complete. Second update. As we have talked about on several occasions at this point, as of July 2021, it's the end of April 2021 now, the Hanban, which is the institution in charge of making the 汉语水平考试, which is the HSK test, has updated their HSK leveling system. So for years and years, it was the HSK 1 through 6. And the HSK 1 had about 150 words. It wasn't much to it. The HSK 6 was really tough and was like the highest level that they had for years. They've now expanded it to be 9 levels and have redefined what each level is. The HSK 1 went from having 150 words to now 500 words. So now passing the HSK 1, while it's not that difficult to do, it's still, it's not such a simple task. You have to learn, 500 words at least. So there were about 50 words in the new HSK 1 that we either were planning on teaching in the intermediate course at some point, but we thought, okay, it's the HSK 1. We'll make sure that these are in the foundation course so that for sure, when you're finished the foundation course, passing the HSK 1 and probably the HSK 2 are fairly easy. And so we integrated these extra 50 words into the foundation course. Now, if you're beyond the foundation course, I made a Google Sheet that I put into an announcement. So you guys should have already received this, but I put into an announcement a Google Sheet where you can just see a rundown of all of them. I've updated the Anki decks. So if you go to any of the Anki deck lessons, which are at the beginning of each phase, then you can re-download them. And, once you re-download the Anki deck, if you re-download an Anki deck, you just open the file and Anki should recognize that you've already reviewed these several cards, but these cards are new, so we'll add just those cards and not change the cards you've already learned. Sometimes it doesn't work properly like that, which is why I'm very glad that we're working on our own solution to flashcards, because when that happens, I'm always like, oh, I don't know why this didn't work and what am I going to do? But that's the plan there, is that we have the new Anki decks in there with the new words. But here's what I'll say, though. If you're concerned about this, don't really be too worried. None of the new 50 words that we added to the foundation course are all that difficult. They're all pretty straightforward. things like 半年, half a year, or things like 小学, elementary school, 中学, middle school, right? These are just like, and then 小学生, 中学生. It's just that the HSK1 has these listed as words that you're supposed to learn. So, okay, we put them in there. But if you're already in the intermediate course, you've probably already mastered many of these words, or at least have no trouble understanding them. There were a few that I thought, okay, we probably should have had this one in the course to begin with. But regardless, just take a look at that Google Sheet. The Google Sheet has everything about the word. So it has the word, the pinyin, the definition, and multiple usages if there are multiple usages. It has living link ideas so that you can do word connection cards. And it also has sentences and top-down words and English translations. So it's like if you just want one quick spot where you can look through everything, then maybe you can just highlight a few that aren't obvious to you and find the Anki cards for them and add them to your queue. But don't worry about it if you look at a word and you go, well, that's obvious what that means. Just skip it. No big deal. Because clearly, Soren, I believe, said that, I'm in the intermediate course and he was having some trouble integrating the Anki deck. But he looked at the words and he was like, well, most of these are pretty obvious. And I was like, yeah, of course. Because if you're already at level 51 in the intermediate course like Soren is, then these words aren't going to be like, I don't understand. What are these words? I can't follow. No, you're going to get them really easily because they're very simple words. So 50 words have now been added to the foundation course and the lessons are added, and that's a nice upgrade there. Also, as a slight little thing, this is just a nice thing as a course creator. Technically, we had about 970 words in the foundation course, so we would say like about 1,000 words, but it always bothered me that it was a little bit less than 1,000. Now it's officially over 1,000 words that you learn in the foundation course, so hooray for that. Now, third, this one is kind of a double point. We finished labeling all of the sentence audio files. I then bundled them together into a zip file that I put at the end in all the level reviews starting from the level 13 review. The level 13 review has all of the sentence audio files from level 13. And I put it at the end of the level in the level reviews because then you've at least seen all of the sentences once, maybe several times in your Anki cards, but it's not the first time you're seeing the sentences. They're not completely foreign to you. And then you get all the audio files, at which point you put them on your phone, you put them on your computer, and you start playing them. And listen, once you start playing these audio files, play them on repeat somewhere in your house, somewhere in your earphones if that's the situation. But ideally, what I would say is like if you have a speaker and like maybe an old phone that you don't use anymore, can plug in the phone, plug in the speaker, connect them, and have these files playing all the time. Don't turn it off. Always playing. Never turn it off. Always on. And I know that might sound too intense, but here's the thing. Just turn the volume down if it gets annoying, but leave it at least at level 1. That way, when it's not annoying to you later, you can turn it back up. This type of immersion, I can't tell you how much this will help you with your listening, because a lot of this is just about reps. So much about learning a new language is about reps. And so if you hear the same sentences over and over, now when you're just at level 13, you'll get through all the sentences and it'll repeat probably several times a day. But then you add level 14 sentences, and then you add level 15 sentences as you keep going. And your playlist gets longer and longer. And eventually, you're going to have 11,000 files or so just from the foundation and the intermediate course. And that's going to take a while to get through, and it's just going to be very good, comprehensible input that, again, can be passive. It's okay if it's passive. In fact, it should be passive, because active listening, of course, you're doing that when you do your Anki. So, like, you don't need to have extra active listening necessarily. Now, you can, if you want, do the following technique to have some more active listening, which would be this. Get it on your phone, open it in your music app, put it on repeat 1. That way you have just the file that you're trying to work on playing. And of course, the file is labeled with the name of the sentence. That's the name of the file. So you can see the sentence, you can listen to it and repeat, and you can listen and get into a rhythm, because there will be some degree of delay between the sentence playing and your chance to repeat it. And of course, if there's not a long enough delay, you can just pause it, right? So sentence plays, you repeat. Sentence plays, you repeat. Sentence plays, you repeat. Then once you feel like I've really got it down, then you just play it on repeat and get into the rhythm of saying it at the exact same time. And you'll figure out exactly how long it is between the file repeating. So you'll say the sentence, there'll be a little beat, and then the sentence will replay, beat, replay, and you'll just keep repeating the sentence along with the native speaker, and that'll be a way to add some shadowing in without too much extra effort. But again, that's the secondary purpose. The primary purpose is to get that immersion going and never turn it off. Just keep it on all the time. I'm telling you, it's well worth it. And just turn the volume down if it gets annoying. Okay, final update is that we have new level review pages. You'll notice on all of the level reviews, at the very top it says, click here to see your progress on words and characters. And that will link you to a web page that shows you your progress up to that point. And the reason we did this is because now we can, from our end, add in a new character, and it will automatically update these web pages. So it's a huge help to us because, as I mentioned in the previous podcast, it's a big pain in the butt to have to manually add new information to any given level review if we simply decide, we're going to add a new word to level 15. Because then the level 16 level review needs to say that that 301 words, not 300 now. And then the level 16 review needs to say that. And then the level 17, you see what I mean? So all the later levels have to indicate that this word is there. So that's all just to say that we now have these new level review links in every level review lesson. And so if you want to check those out, you can go to any of the level review lessons and see that link at the top, which will help you see all of your progress up until that point. And the other nice thing about it is that if we want to make any changes to how we present that, it's a little bit easier and we can apply it across the board. And it was actually made by the guy who's helping us do our new flashcard software. So that's great to have from him. So that's all of the updates and announcements. The intermediate course stories are in progress, but they're getting close. And now that I've finished that, I'll be able to spend more time on the advanced course after we do some, administrative catch up that we always need to do at the end of every month. So with that in mind, let's move on to the comments and questions. First comment we have is a bit of a success from Gavia Arctica on the community forum. She said, just had to tell this. I spoke Chinese today. Actually had a conversation, about 95% in Chinese. Only used a few English words in 2 or 3 occasions. I live in a totally non-Chinese environment, so this is really my first time speaking for more than a sentence or two. It was a Hello Talk friend who happened to be online. We had been writing off and on for a few months, and now she called. It was easier because we know a few things about each other, what we work with and family and so on. So it was easier to pick things up from the context, and she knows my level so she could adjust to what I could possibly understand. It's great when you find a language partner who can do that. Many people can do that, but often you'll find a language partner who's not so sure, which can be great if you're getting a bit more advanced. Like I remember years ago when I was still, I would still consider myself in a very much a learning phase of Chinese. I dated a Chinese girl for a few months, and she just spoke as if I were a Chinese person to me, it actually improved my level at that point. But like, if I had not been as high a level as I was at that time, I might have just given up because it was too hard. So like when you're in the earlier stages, it's good if you have somebody who knows how to lower their level to where you are. So that's great. Okay, so let's continue. Every now and then, I did not really understand much of what she was saying at all, but somehow I still thought I got the idea. Checked shortly in English a few times. Did you mean? And yes, I did get the meaning from context and maybe her tone of voice, even if I did not understand most of the words. Yeah, that's an interesting point there because you'd be surprised how much you just sort of get without knowing you're getting it. It's kind of a weird phenomenon, but it is true. Like you can pick up on so many other cues, especially if you have video or you're in person. And so a lot of times you can figure it out, and that helps you acquire vocabulary. So it's great that you're doing this. Continuing. It feels nice that the sound of Chinese feels so familiar by now that I can sort of pretend to understand it even if I really don't yet. It does not matter if I sound terrible or don't get it at all. I'm communicating in Chinese. I can't even describe how awesome it feels, and the most amazing thing about it is that even if it was incredibly hard and I don't have words and I don't understand, it still felt somehow natural. As natural as getting up every morning, starting reviews in Anki right away, and finishing the day making movies and handwriting characters, listening to the weekly Mandarin Blueprint podcast. Speaking is just the logical next step at some point, naturally. For me, it was today. I guess I'll remember today forever. Thank you, Luke and Phil. Well, that's fantastic. I'm very happy for you, Gavia, and these moments are treasure these moments. Because you don't get them every day. Like, you have your daily Anki practice, and you have your adding bricks to the building, but you don't every day notice how big the building has gotten or how far you've gotten up the mountain, to mix metaphors. And so, congratulations. This is the type of step that makes you go, oh yeah, it was worth it. Because the disadvantage of recognizing the truth of language acquisition, which is that you must get comprehensible input before you even bother with output, is that you can always let that thought creep in, which goes, is this even working? Like, is this stuff that I'm doing even working? Because I haven't really spoken Chinese yet. So, you could go months without speaking, and you're like, am I ever going to speak? And that little negative thought pattern can come up. And when you have this moment, you realize, oh, it was all worth it. It was all happening. I was building a foundation. If you want to build a building, you got to dig down first. You don't even go up for months and months. So it's a good analogy in the sense that you have to build the foundation and dig down even. And it feels like you're even going into a place where you feel like not only are you not making progress, but maybe you just wasted your time. Because look, I'm not even moving up yet. But you can't move up if you don't build the foundation. So very well done, Gavia, and I'm very happy for you. Next, we have Lynn Ford on Make a Movie for Boo. She says, I am such a dork because several characters we learned so far in level 14, I'm over here bouncing up and down in my seat, clapping, cheering, yay, I'm so glad I am learning these ones, LOL. I know them by sight, as many of these have been staring at me on my PM Anki cards, pronunciation mastery Anki cards, for a while now, but I am glad to finally be at the stage where we are doing the movie method with them. Seriously, I am having so much fun. Not to mention being able to read and understand sentences. It gives me a really big boost in confidence that 1, this method really does work, and 2, that the possibility of being fluent in this language is not only possible but highly likely at this point. Thank you for all that you and your team do. Well, that's awesome. Another, like, maybe at a different moment than Gavia was at, that we talked about previously, but another, like, there's just so many success moments, right, where you can recognize, I won this character, or I won this character component, or I won this thing. It's funny that sometimes we think of enthusiasm at success as being kind of dorky, which is like, I guess the bullies won the framing there. But still, it's like, that's just the thrill you get from success. I mean, you've done so much to get to this point, Lynn, and now, you're seeing that you're getting that confidence that you're going to make it. And that always happens. If you keep going, you'll eventually reach a point where you go, oh, even though I'm not there yet, I know I will make it. It's like, going back to the mountain analogy, you might go, oh, look at how high that mountain is. And, oh, right now it's really hard to get up. But, you just slow your pace down a little bit, and then you can suddenly get a good rhythm going again. And you pick your pace back up. And then at some point you realize, oh, wait, I've gone several days and I've moved towards my goal, and I've gotten stronger. I've gotten hardier. I've gotten better at this daily habit of just moving towards this thing that's a struggle but also rewarding. And then at some point you go, oh, well, nothing can stop me now. So congratulations, Lynn. Lynn Ford again on Vocab Unlocked from 西休息 and 休息日. She says, I am using multiple pictures for the word review cards in my Anki deck. Is that an okay tactic? I've been struggling with remembering word reviews, and so thought about the different elements of the characters and have been adding several pics to help. For example, Xiuxi. I added a picture of someone leaning on a tree, resting, and a pair of lungs shaped in a heart. I don't know if getting pics that specific will not help me as much or is too easy in trying to figure out the word, but it seems to help me out a little bit more. Well, the first thing I would say is that if you feel like it's helping you, then, I mean, it probably is. It's probably not an illusion that you're being helped by this particular way of going about it. So I'll say that first. And certainly it's okay to have multiple pictures to help. I would recommend for Lynn, go back to the Phase 2 course and watch the new videos we just posted this week. And that'll help you get more techniques, and you can download the Vocab Mnemonics cheat sheet if you haven't already and see if that helps even more. But that all sounds great. I have no objections to any of that. Eleanor McComb on Casting Call for G. She says, I'm not super familiar with Mind Palace memory techniques, but would there be a problem with me casting my son Gabriel as my G actor? My concern is that I know him at so many ages, and he will obviously continue to grow. He's 10. On the other hand, I know him much better than any actor I would cast, and so he's well and truly planted in my mind. So here are my thoughts on this. First of all, I don't think it matters that it's Gabriel at 10 or Gabriel at 5 or Gabriel at 15 when he gets to be older or wherever. You're still going to recognize that's Gabriel, that means G. So that's all it is. I mean, it's a little bit less complicated than it might seem like, because all you have to do is see the thing, see whatever it is in your mind's eye and go, that represents G, right? That's all that has to happen. I will say that casting very close family members does run one risk, which is that you might have a whole section of things that you don't want to imagine. Because if it's somebody who you don't have a close emotional connection to, then you might not want them to be involved in a scene that is, I don't know, either violent or sexy or something like that. So you wouldn't want to do that, and therefore you're cutting off a whole area that you might get involved in. But that said, though, the fact that you're emotionally connected very well with your son means that might not matter. Like, the advantage that you'll get from the close emotional connection might be enough to cover up the problem of not wanting to take your mind to certain places, right? So that's all I would say about that. I don't think it matters what age he's at, because again, whether he's 5 or 10, you're still going to recognize that it's Gabriel and then go Gabriel equals G. So hopefully that'll help. Oscar Haglund on Vocab Unlocked from Yuan. This is unclear to me. 愿你天天开心，事事如愿. Right? So I can understand why this might be a little bit unclear. So let's take a look at it and break it down. 愿你, desire for you, right? So that's pretty straight up. 天天, so when you have two measure words in a row, like 天天, because 天 is a measure word for a day, right? So that's a time measure word, right? So 愿你天天开心. So when you say 天天, you mean every one of that measure word, or in this case, every day. So I desire for you to be happy, 开心, every day, 天天. And in Chinese, you say the 天天 first. So that's the first half of the sentence. And then the second part of the sentence, 事事如愿. 事事. So in this case, we have two nouns, but it's kind of like measuring things, like all the things that are going to happen to you. So 事事, all things, all events, and then 如, as, similar to, 愿, desire. So 事事如愿. All things are like or as or similar to your desires, right? So this is a very nice sentence. It's saying, I desire for you to be happy every day and for the things in your life to go as you wish. So it's not it's not easy to perfectly translate. However, it is it is pretty clear. Like all of the characters do make sense in this one. Like there's no character that is out of place. 事事如 Zhu is a key character here, meaning like or as if or similar to yuan, desire. And of course, the implication is that it's your desire. Hence why the sentence starts off with 愿你,天天开心,事事如愿. So the original 愿你 applies to both statements. It applies to both 天天开心 and 事事如愿. So yeah, hopefully that clears that up, Oscar. Next, we have James Snow on It's a Word for gan. 2 questions. First, how come the course has us making props for some characters such as ban and not for others like gan here? It's a good question. The answer is that some characters are components in others and some are not. Now, in the case of ban, there are other characters in the foundation course that are going to use it. And in the case of gan, you're not going to use it as a prop until the intermediate course. So we're not going to bother you with it for now. We will actually make you make a prop for this one in the future, but not until the intermediate course when you need it. No need to learn it now and then, eventually forget what it is and then move on. So that's the reason there. And then some characters, it's because they're never going to be used as a prop because they're already full. So if you can imagine that you've got a character that has 3 components and those 3 components never get used as a component in a future character, then there's no prop to make. There's no time when you're going to need a prop to represent the entire thing. So you won't make props for those either. So that's the answer to the first question. Second question. I used the scene of a lightsaber cutting off the top of a syringe and sand gushing out to represent gan. I'd like to use sand as a prop for gan, but how may I avoid getting confused when it's time to learn the word for sand, since I will also imagine sand in that scene? I guess the question is, how do you avoid confusing props and meaning in a scene? Yeah, this is a good question. It's one of those things that naturally sorts itself out as you go. Like you don't end up it doesn't end up actually being that much of an issue. And so here's why, because the character for sand is sha, which is going to have your SH actor outside the entrance of your A set with the water prop and the prop for few, which it kind of looks like a guy sweeping. So maybe you have a guy sweeping and the water prop, and there's going to be say your water prop is a hose. You've got the SH actor, a guy sweeping, and the hose outside the entrance of your A set. Now, right now, we already know that this has very little to do with gan because you're not in the AN set. The G actor is not there. So, and the props are different. So it's not actually going to be that hard to recognize, okay, this is a totally different situation. Now, also the prop for sand, maybe the prop for sand is like a sand castle, something that's a little bit more tangible. I mean, sand is tangible, sure, but maybe a sand castle would be a better prop so that it's just a clearer and stronger image that's distinct. And then the movie for sand doesn't necessarily have to contain a sand castle. It could contain some other form of sand. And so because the actor and the props and the set are all different, I don't think that it's actually going to be difficult to understand when you move forward. In fact, I know it won't be. So it's a totally understandable question to have in the early days, but it's not actually going to be as big of a concern as you might imagine it will be. But I like where your head's at though, James, and you're asking good questions. Susan Walsh on bonus. Strategy is everything while learning Chinese. She says, this is my 3rd language. I took French for 3 years in school, 7th through 9th grade, because my first teacher happened to be fabulous with a unique method of teaching the language. By the end of my first year, I was fluent. Awesome. Unfortunately, when I started high school, my new French teacher used one method, rote learning. I was so bored by the end of the first month that I knew I wouldn't continue. I dropped out at the end of the year. Fair enough. Yeah, it's amazing how teachers can just ruin the whole experience when they do that. What I did get from my experience is that I love language, and I love the challenge that comes with learning a new language. When I chose to learn Mandarin, I was excited, nervous, and terrified that I'd waste my time and not learn enough to communicate with native speakers. What drew me to Mandarin Blueprint was one simple thing, that I would be able to read, write, and speak Mandarin when I was done. After going through 5 levels now, I am beyond excited to learn more, and to know that I am building a solid foundation for the language from the beginning. Pretty darn brilliant for a quote unquote, couple of fellas who had enough of the nonsense teaching materials out there and decided to change it. Well, ride that motivation wave, Susan. That sounds great. And, we definitely are interested in not doing the rote learning thing, having as much of your personality go into it as possible, doing the things that are the opposite of what your French teacher did at that point. And so I'm glad that you found something that you are motivated to continue. That's great. Next, we have Thomas Brand on bonus helper, turning adjectives into adverbs with D or D. So Thomas says, very helpful video. I sometimes catch myself gazing at clouds floating by outside the window during lectures, but I was so baffled at why I'd seen the character for dirt inexplicably appearing in several sentences that I sat with rapt attention in the hope of learning why it was there. It makes complete sense now. Thanks. I like this comment from Thomas because it reaffirms something that we really believe about learning grammar, which is that there are certain grammatical points, duh being one of them, and the duh, dee, duh idea. There's these three duhs, and they all do slightly different things. You have the basic duh, which is possessive, like, 我的话筒, my microphone. You've got the how did a verb happen by going verb duh plus an adjective, so 跑得快, run fast, 跑得快. Right? And then you have this de, which is the same character for di, as in di shang, or di tu, or di li xue, as in geography. Di tu is map, di shang is on the ground, right? So it's got this di, dirt, ground relation. But then when it's pronounced de, what it does is it connects adjectives to verbs. So it essentially turns an adjective into an adverb. So 开心 is an adjective meaning happy. 开心的 means happily, and then you say doing what? 开心的跑, happily running, right? 开心的说话, happily speaking. And so you get the idea there. So Thomas says, I was wondering what the heck is this all about? And then we introduce the idea, and then he feels like it's got his rapt attention because he saw it previously and developed the curiosity about why it would be that way. This is really important because a lot of times teachers just introduce a concept that you've never even seen before. And when you just introduce a concept without ever seeing it before, then I've said this many times, but the emotional response to it is just kind of like, okay, so there's this thing you can do with this idea I've never heard of, right? It doesn't grab you. It doesn't make you have rapt attention. Right? But when you do introduce it and say, hey, how about we tease this idea? What the heck is dirt doing in the middle of this sentence? And then you're like, what? Dirt? How does that make sense between 开心 and 说话? What the heck? Happy dirt speak? What's going on? And then that confusion / curiosity then comes into a lesson about it and you go, oh, that's it. Right? That feeling is what we're going for. I'm so glad to hear that Thomas is feeling that when he watched this lesson. Next, we have Ann Giles on 一样 in context. The sentence, 我的手机和他的不一样. Yes, I was able to read it too, all by myself. And that sentence just means my phone is not the same as his, right? And Ann is, of course, she's been writing some great articles recently in support of Mandarin Blueprint. And Anne, I think, has got the right idea about why Mandarin is so important to learn right now. For years we were saying, there's so many opportunities in China. And I actually still think that's true. Despite what the media might make you think about China, there's still a lot of stuff going on here that there's a demand for foreigners to be involved in. So, there's definitely lots of opportunities in China. However, the pandemic and global tensions and, things that are going on in America right now, there's just a lot of stuff that makes that feel a little bit too shallow. Because really what we need to focus on here is that there are major civilizations in the world. We might say there's the Indian civilization, there is the Sinitic civilization, the Chinese civilization, there is the Islamic world and that civilization, and then there's the Western civilization, and you can maybe, these very broad strokes, but related by Christianity. So you might say that Latin America is a separate civilization, but it's at least connected to the Western world in the sense that they're all either Catholic or Protestant, right? And these major civilizations need to be communicating with each other, and we can't be cutting ourselves off. That's a mistake, right? And and this is not to make any judgment about what civilization is doing better or has the better values or anything like that. That's something we'll figure out if we're communicating. But what's not going to work is if we're just assuming that we understand what the other civilizations are all about, judging them harshly from afar. That's the type of thing that gets really dangerous, especially when we're in a world of, weaponry like we have now. I mean, the history is full of, I'm quite optimistic about the future. I'm one of those people who believes that we might have turned a corner, and that the fact that our weaponry is so powerful is the part of the reason that we haven't gotten into another international conflict. However, let's not kid ourselves either. History is filled with people figuring out different ways to defeat the enemy. And when you're talking about countries that have nuclear weaponry, you got to figure out a way to work things out, because the alternative is so dire that, it's terrible to even think about, right? So we need to be communicating. The major civilizations of the world need to be communicating, and Mandarin Blueprint is one of the best tools we have for the Sinitic world to communicate with the Western world, and I think that this is a real opportunity for us to do that. Anne has written some articles recently encouraging people to take the next 6 months and really delve into Mandarin Blueprint. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank Anne for that. And also, I'm so glad that she's finding her own individual success on the course. Next, we have Jeff Johnson on 想法 in context. So he says, while I think Christopher's comment is useful, I'm still a bit confused about something. It seems that we have been seeing a lot of subject plus de plus thing the subject owns or is connected to. But in the last 2 lessons, we have had lines like 想法的人, and he's referring to a sentence that is 我认识很多有想法的人. And so 想 it's 有想法的人, and really 很多有想法的人. So I'll get into that in a second. I would have translated that as ideas own people, which I suppose could describe the way that some people obsess over a really good idea, but the translation implies it is people having ideas. So I'm curious about the structure there. I'm also curious about Christopher's comment. I suspect I'm missing something in my studies since I'm not starting to get bits of it like this yet. Well, don't worry, you will definitely get this concept very soon. So I already responded to Jeff with a Loom video here, but I thought I would go into this in the podcast as well, because you really do learn it through context quite easily as you go through and read more sentences. Like, this is not something that is going to be all that hard when you see more and more sentences like this. But Jeff is wanting to look at it from the perspective of the word. And really, we should be looking at it more from the sentence structure layer. So this is what's called a 定语. And a 定语 is when you have a description of either the subject or the object. In this sentence, it's the object. So the subject is 我. The verb is 认识, know, or are acquainted with. And then the object is 人. So 我认识人. That's not too much of a statement. I know people. Okay, fine. 我认识很多人. Now we've added a 定语. This is, again, we're talking about sentence structure here. So 很多人, and you could say 很多的人, but you'd usually just drop the de in that case. 很多人. I know a lot of people. Okay, that's a sentence you might say. I know a lot of people. Fair enough. But that's not what the speaker wants to say. They want to get a little more specific. They want to say, I know a lot of people with ideas. And 有想法的人. Like, so 有想法 means to just have a lot of opinions. Maybe it's kind of implying an intellectual, right? So somebody who has a lot of ideas. 我认识 很多有想法的人, but 很多有想法 is all just describing 人. And when you have multiple descriptions of 人, you'll connect it, of the, let's say the object, which in this case is 人, you'll connect it with 的. And this is called a 定语, meaning we're going to add descriptions to the object, and more specifically, it's a 多项定语, which means multiple descriptive sentence structure. So like you're applying multiple descriptions to the object, which in this case is many, 很多, and 有想法的, idea having people. So I know many idea having people. And so if you think of it more from the sentence structure level, you'll get that the 的 is just adding the descriptions to the object. It's a way too intellectualized way to think about it, because in the end, it just sort of feels, it'll just start to feel normal. I bet, Jeff, that you'll look back at this sentence in maybe even a couple of months, but certainly 6 months to a year from now, and you'll go, oh, well, this was really easy, actually. This wasn't really that tricky to understand. It just feels that way because you're early into it. You're early into this idea. So you'll for sure get it as you move forward, and that's the idea there. Think of it more from the 定语 perspective, the descriptions of the object, or in some cases it could be the subject, but in this case it was the object. Next we have Ann Giles on Vocab Unlocked from ge, and gumar. So Google Translate gives these pronunciations: gumar, 一点儿, huar, and war. She wrote in here a different one, but it should have been the one for play. She actually confirmed that later. I'd welcome a little audio or video help with these. Thanks if you can help. Well, as a reminder, and I think it's Unit 5 of Pronunciation Mastery, we have a lesson on R. And R, what makes it special is that when it does not mean son, as in S-O-N, like son and daughter, when it does not mean that, when it's just a pronunciation indicator, it's one of the only instances, and probably the only instance of any frequency, where you have a character that you add that does not add a syllable. It just combines with the previous syllable. In general, as a rule of thumb in Chinese, every character has its own syllable. So if you see 3 characters, there are 3 syllables. But in the case of R, it tends to combine with the previous syllable. And especially with nasal finals that end in N, the N tends to get dropped. And the N often gets dropped anyway, just because, like, for example, government, environment, you don't really say the N in those words in English, and the similar phenomenon can happen in Chinese. But it really happens with these things. So, for example, I might say one, but if I say war, there's no N anymore. It just kind of gets melted into the R and lost. So that's the way you can think of R there, is it kind of combines. Now, how about hui? That doesn't end in N. Hui, huar, right? So there's a little bit of a dropping of the E sound there. So hui, e, huar. You don't really get the E. So whatever is at the end of a syllable tends to get melted into the R sound. And this is very common in Beijing to hear the R hua. But it's also in 普通话. It's also in Mandarin a fair bit. People they'll say war all the time. Now, one of the examples of a north-south difference here, northern China, southern China, is 一点儿. In the south, I hear people, especially women for some reason, say 一点, and not the 一点儿. But both are acceptable, and in 普通话, in Mandarin, they're both kind of interchangeable. But 哥们儿, for example, I never hear anybody say 哥们. I mean, technically you could, I guess, but I never hear it, even in Mandarin in the South. Huar is usually referring to a moment, or a period of time. So 一会儿, very common to hear it with the R sound. It's not very common that you hear that without it. War, that's an example of the only verb that you tend to hear with the R hua. It's usually nouns. And the war, why would that pretty much always be with the R hua? Well, it's because there's another word, one, that means to finish. And that, in terms of finished, you could say 他完了 can be a metaphorical way of saying, oh, he's done for. He's like, he's going to die, or he's finished. And that can have a sort of morbid feel to it. And so you want to make sure that you say war for play, or like have a casual time, the opposite of work, basically. And so you don't want to say one and confuse people and make make you think that you're saying, I'm finished, as opposed to I'm chilling or I'm playing or whatever. So that's how you say the arhua, and a little bit of extra tidbits about it. Gavin Meakin on level 17 complete. He says, it's taken me a while to get through this level, and now that I'm done, I'm feeling quite reflective. While I've kept up with my daily Anki reviews, I've found I haven't been logging in and completing lessons as often as I was in previous levels. Juggling family life, work, and other pursuits mean I don't always have the time to sit down, log in, and unlock new content. And I'm okay with that. As long as I'm doing my daily Anki review and then sitting down and unlocking new content when I can, I'm making progress. More importantly, I can see my progress each time I do my Anki review. The more I review a character, word, sentence, or dialogue in Anki, the more proficient my recall becomes. I suppose this is all part of the Mandarin Blueprint journey, and I'm enjoying every step, onwards and upwards. Well, awesome, Gavin. I'm glad to hear that you're okay with the vicissitudes of life sometimes getting in the way of having, like, your daily learning progress. The bare minimum is that you keep what you've already learned. If you use Anki every day, then for sure you'll keep what you already have learned. And so it's okay if you didn't add anything new. You kept what you did know so that you're not losing ground. And that way, when you add a new thing, okay, I'm definitely going to remember this new thing, because even if tomorrow I don't have time to add more new things, I still am going to recall what I learned today. And so you've got the exact right attitude. And hey, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Like, you're going to get there at some point. And so who cares whether it's, June of 2022 or October of 2023 or January of 2025. It doesn't really matter. It's like eventually you'll get there, and then you'll have all the rest of your life knowing Chinese. So you're well on your way. Bethany Fehr on 休息日 in context, trying to figure out the syntax in the sentence 休息日我不吃面包我吃, and then she leaves the sentence from there. Why does the time 休息日 come before the host 我 instead of immediately following it, like 我早上吃面包? Is speaking of a specific day different than mentioning a time of day? No, it's actually simpler than that. Just the day and the time and the host can be interchanged. So the common Chinese sentence is to say host plus time plus location plus doing what, right? So 我早上在家吃饭, right? So it's I in the morning at home eat. So that's an example of the classic Chinese sentence. And the thing is, you can just switch the time and the host. You could say 早上我在家吃饭, and it's also correct. So it's just a matter of interchangeability. You can do both. Next, Xiao En on 上来 in context. In the sentence 我马上上来, will it be grammatically correct and give the same idea if I say 我上来马上 instead? That's the first question. No, you can't say that. You have to say the time first. So in Bethany's previous question, she asked about switching the time in the host, which you can. So you could say 马上我上来. That would be okay, although less common than 我马上上来. But you can't switch the time and the action and be grammatically correct. So you must put the time before the action. 我马上上来 is fine. Now, he asked another question that's different. So, same with the sentence 上来了一个人. Will it be correct? Will it be the same meaning and be grammatically correct if I say 一个人上来了 instead? So, in this case, both sentences are grammatically correct, but there is a slightly different feel to them. So, 上来了一个人 is focused on the 上来. It's emphasizing the 上来了, right? Whereas 一个人上来了 is focusing on the 一个人. It's just a slightly different emphasis. And like it's all about context. When you say 上来了一个人, you're likely talking about the location, and you're kind of talking about the circumstances of the location, and the person is less important than that somebody came up. And then if you say 一个人上来了, you're more likely focused on the person. Like it's just, that's the emphasis in your mind, that the person is there. So 一个人上来了, I feel like the next thing that's going to happen is you're going to go talk to them. Whereas 上来了一个人 is more likely you're talking about the environment in some way. So it's a very subtle difference, but the point is both of them are grammatically correct in that case. Matt Shubert on 联系 in context. Hey guys, I might have missed this earlier in the course, but is the 上 or 不上 a common way to express if you were able to do something or not, specifically referring to the sentences 3 and 4 above? 如果你联系上了他 and 我今天一天都联系不上你. This is basically like the concept of a verb result. So the verb how is what we call this. And in the word structure lessons that we have in phase 2, the verb how lesson explains how this works, and also the affixes. So the infixes specifically. So an infix is just either de or bu between a verb and a result to say the verb can be achieved or the verb can't be achieved. And then how you determine the result, there's a lot of different results. And in this case, 上 is one of the results. So I got you on the phone, for example, or online. I was able to 联系上, successfully get a hold of you, right? So you imagine I got you on the phone. That's why 上 is there, right? 听到, 听不到, 听见, 听不见, 听得见, 听不见, right? These are different ideas, like, or 看到, 看不到, 看得到吗? 看得到, right? So like the result, so 看 means to look, 看到 means to see, right? So successfully see. 看不到 means can't see, cannot successfully see. 看得到 means, oh, I can see. I'm able to see, right? And so 联系上 means successfully connect. 联系得上 able to connect. 联系不上 unable to connect. So this is basically the idea there between these different ones. It's not like a specific type of word. What we were hoping for there is that you would recognize the pattern, right? So that the pattern, and I mean, now that I've pointed it out, I'm sure you will. 联系不上 is the infix pattern. So you've got 联系上, which is the verb plus result. Verb 联系 connect. 上 means successful. You're successful in that connection. And then 联系不上 means you're unable to be successful in that connection. Next, we have kennerminer on compound final ou, 走了, 走吧, and 我走了. Hello, I'm curious about how 在 might fit in as the present tense of I'm going. Would 我在走 be a valid alternative to 我走了? So they're slightly different meanings. So 我走了, the reason why you say 了 there is because a decision has been made. You're leaving, right? So the decision is over. It's a completed action. The change has happened. You're leaving. 我在走 means I'm currently leaving, which is more like what you might say. Like imagine you say to your friend who you're at the bar with. You're at a bar and you're saying 我走了, meaning I've decided to leave. And then your phone rings and your girlfriend's like, hey, where are you? And you're like, oh, 我在走, right? So I'm leaving to her, right? Because she's not with you and you're saying, I'm leaving currently. So the difference is basically that 我走了 is focused on the decision that you're leaving and that the decision has been made. And 我在走 is more about the process. And so think of it like that and I'm sure you'll be fine. Matt Shubert on 楼 in context. 楼 meaning building. There's a minor grammar question, but I was curious about this sentence. 这栋楼里都是中国人. Could it also be 这栋楼里都有中国人? and have the same meaning? The second one feels more natural to me based on all the sentence we've seen so far. Is there any difference? Yes. So the difference here is between the verb 是 and 有. And so the subject is 这栋楼里. 这栋楼里. So within this building, in this building, inside this building. That's the subject. 都. Now, here's the indication of why you can use 是 but you can't use 有. It's all about 都. So 这栋楼里都是中国人. So what's the multiplicity here? Because we're using 都 to mean all. It could mean both if there was two, but the point is there must be a plurality of something. Well, there's only one building. There's only one inside the building. So it can't be the building, right? Whereas if you said even that there's two buildings, so you said, or three buildings, let's say, 这三栋楼里都有中国人. That sentence would be okay because now we have three buildings and the 都 is applying to the multiplicity of buildings and it's saying they all have Chinese people in them. It's a different meaning because it's not saying all of the people inside are Chinese people. But in the first sentence, 这栋楼里都是中国人, is emphasizing that all the people inside all of them are Chinese people. And so it can't be the one inside the building and have 都 because 都 does not apply to singular things. And so it must be applying to the Chinese people who are inside. So the point is just that it's not any other nationality in this building. So hopefully that clears that up. Matt Shubert on 没什么 in context. For the first usage here is 没什么, basically equivalent to 没事儿. I hear the latter all the time from native speakers, but not as much as the former. I mean, they're similar. 没事儿 tends to be used alone. And it just means don't worry about it. And 没什么could mean that, but you tend to use 没什么a little bit more. So like 没什么关系, right? So there isn't any relationship, no worries, or that's essentially a longer way of saying 没关系. 他没什么话要说. He doesn't have anything to say, right? You'll use it more in context, but you could say 没什么, right? Like there isn't anything. There isn't anything. No big deal. It's two ways of kind of saying the same thing, but as a singular statement, 没事儿 is more common, or 没关系 is more common. But 没什么 can be used many times in the context of sentences. But it's not that it couldn't be used by itself. It's just less common to use by itself. Next, we have the submissions for the vocab living links, and this relates directly to what I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast. People who are coming up with mnemonic techniques for remembering compound vocabulary words in our new Vocab Unlocked lessons. So first, we have Al Burley on Vocab Unlocked from 合法, which means legal. He says speed, camera, and sign. You need to watch how fast 合法 you are going to stay in the legal limit. Right, so that's a good connection to legal, which has to do with traffic law. You know, it's funny because you rarely see people get pulled over in China. This is just a little cultural tidbit. In America, you get cops pulling over people on the side of the road, and the lights come on, pull over, they walk over, give you a ticket. You don't see that in China, which is interesting. Now, you do see drunk driving checkpoints. Those will happen all the time, but you don't see the this particular thing, which is kind of funny. It's an interesting element to the life here, that there's not really that phenomenon of people getting pulled over. But nonetheless, though, it is certainly a phenomenon in many countries, and so it's a good connection to legal. I like that. And of course, 合法, how fast, similar sound, so it's a good connection. Matt Shubert on Vocab Unlocked from 最好. This was one of the fastest living links in the whole course for me. I want to be the very best that no one ever was. Ash Ketchum from Pokemon. I never really watched Pokemon, but even I know who Ash Ketchum is, despite the fact that I never, was into the show. And that's a good example of a strong cultural trope. If you know a character, even though you never were into something, like you never were into Star Wars, but you probably still know who Darth Vader is, it's like that's a strong cultural trope. It gets into the cultural memory without having to necessarily even be something you took in personally. So nice. Rick Angleland on Vocab Unlocked from 变化 and 变得. So although 变得 is given here as a dictionary word, isn't it actually like any verb followed by 的, then a complement of degree? For example, 如果不注意保湿人的皮肤就会变得很干, which means if you don't pay attention to moisturization and keeping your skin moisturized, then your skin will end up being quite dry. He's saying, isn't this just like any verb where you have verb plus de plus degree? And, yeah, it is, but it's just such a common thing. Changed to what? Changed to what adjective? And so since it's so common, we actually put it there as a word because, how often are you going to say that things changed to be another way? They were this way and then they changed to be another way. And also we want to distinguish it from 变成. So 变成 is another way to use 变, which means to become something. So 变成老师, to become a teacher, right? 变得很干, become dry. So that's an example of you tend to put 变得 before adjectives, as you do with anything that's verb de plus adjective, but then you do 变成 before nouns. So we wanted to have that contrast there. 变成 comes a little bit later in the course when 成 gets unlocked, but that's the idea behind actually introducing it as a word. Rick Angleland on Vocab Unlocked from 关心关门关注 and 关上. Living link suggestion for 关注, since I found this word combination difficult to remember. 关, to close something within one's attention, and 注, to pour attention on it. Yeah, because 注意 means to pour meaning on something, aka pay attention, right? And so that what you're paying attention to, you're sort of by your actions pouring meaning into it. And then 关注 is to follow something, and 关注 is like to follow, like you follow someone on Twitter or WeChat or something, right? So it's kind of like I'm closing my attention onto these people who I follow. So you could think of it like that. And then other ones here, 关心, to have a closed heart on something means that you care about it. You're not letting other things into your caring. You're closing it in this set group. So 关心 means to care about someone. And then 关门, that's straight up to close door. That's straight up there. Pretty straightforward. Somebody slamming a door is a good enough connection there. And then 关上 also means to close, but it can mean to close a door, or it can mean to close a window, or it can mean to close, to turn something off, right? So like your shoji,手机, to turn your cell phone off. 把手机关上, right before a movie or something, right? So that's those different unlocked words from 关. Next, we have Jonathan Glazier on Vocab Unlocked from 画, 计划. For me, the image of the classic American football huddle, where they plan the next play at the end for the mnemonic, I have given them shouting a 计划, as they seem to do, right? Yeah, it's like the quarterback goes in, shares what the play is, and they, go 计划, and then go and run the play. So that's a good connection there from Jonathan. And sure, yep, that's what they're doing. They're planning. They're calculating and delineating, calculating 记, delineating 画, their plan. I like it. Next, we'll move to the movie scene shares, which are the full mnemonic scenes to remember individual characters. Will Raley on Make a Movie from Yang. Now, Yang means to raise and support. It's often used in the concept of like you raise children, 养孩子, 培养孩子. Is one word for it. There's lots of words for yang. It's very useful. Yin yang is a word that means to it means nutrition. So basically, like, nutrition is obviously in the realm of cultivating or supporting or raising your own body, and so that which is nutritious is, it has a degree of yin yang. The YE actress in the ANG's living room set. A sheep is blocking the YE actress's view of the living room. She is too lazy to move, so the YE actress gets Kero, which is his representation of the bottom component, an anime character, to raise and support the sheep up in the air so that the YE actress can see. So, yeah, I mean, obviously Will is using this as a literal raise, like he's literally raising the sheep in the air, when it's more like raise sheep from being a little, like a shepherd would. They raise the sheep from being little and raise them to become adults. But still, I like this idea. So, for example, and this is a thing that we really try to emphasize all the time. It's one thing that Jessica M on the course is always giving us grief about. But you can have the wrong concept of what a character means, and it doesn't matter, because all you have to have in your mind is that the word raise and support comes up. And then when you learn new characters, you'll realize, oh, I thought it meant like literally raise and support, but it's more metaphorical. But you'll figure that out because you still have the concepts of raise and support in your mind, and you already know that there are two ways of saying raise and support. You've got raise and support literally, and you've got raise and support metaphorically. You already know that. That isn't something Mandarin Blueprint taught you. And so the fact that you'll then realize, oh, this is more the metaphorical raise and support later when you learn it in several words is enough. It doesn't matter that you had the wrong concept in your make a movie scene, because the connection you needed was already in your brain before you even made the scene. So that's one of the reasons why it's not actually that important that you have the perfect understanding of what the character is before you've seen it in context. It's a thing that is really hard to get people to understand, but you cannot understand what the character means before you understand what the character means. And the only way to understand what the character means fully is to see it in several words and see it in context of paragraphs and sentences. So if you're trying to understand what the character means before you've ever seen it in any words or in any sentences, you are trying to put the cart before the horse, and it's not going to work. So like, it's just one of those things that until you've seen it in lots of sentences and seen it in lots of words, you cannot get a concept of it perfectly. So just stop trying to do that. Just accept that this is the part of the process. And luckily with Mandarin Blueprint, guess where we put that? In the very next lesson. So after you learn a character, the very next lesson shows you the vocab unlocked from that character. And then we show you that vocab in the context of longer form stories. Now the intermediate course stories are not yet published, but they're, very soon going to be published. Will Raley on Make a Movie for Jie, which means stairs. The most common word for this is tai jie, but it's not the only word. You've got jie ceng or jie ji. And so there's lots of different words for it, but tai jie is literally the words for stairs. So platform stairs. JI actress at the E set front door. A brick wall blocks the front door and the JI actress's way into the house. Kiro, the right side component, comes along and uses his powers to magically spring up some stairs. The JI actress uses the stairs to cross over the brick wall. Simple scene, straight up. The stairs are very clearly the most important thing in this story. And add some sound effects of the walking up the stairs coming out of the ground, and you're good to go. Oscar Haglund on to Make a Movie for Qian. And this is the character that you'll use in qianbi, which means pencil. A dune sandworm, bottom right component, is sitting in a school bench, top right component, in alchemy class. In front of him is a gold bar, left side component. The worm drools on the gold bar and it turns into lead. The Queen of England walks up and bashes the worm on the head and shouts, "You should be turning lead into gold, not gold into lead." So I guess the Queen of England, Queen for qi, makes sense. And I like it. Super clear. Lead and gold's the connection to alchemy there. It makes sense. And it's a connection that was already there. I love it. That's a great scene. John Nomura on Make a Movie for Pai. So Pai, this is a great character. It means to send someone. So Pai Song is the word you would use for a person who is sending a package, for example, like your Kuai Di Yuan is a package deliverer, the UPS guy, and what he is doing or she is doing when they're delivering something is their pai song, and it you could say fa song, but fa song is more like for example, a text message you might fa song 给别人. But that's not a person delivering it. Pai means to send someone out to do it. Then you've got pai that means like a faction. Like, for example, a religious sect is called a pai, or the left wing and the right wing are called the 左派 and 右派. So there's another word for it. But then yet another one is pai, meaning like it's an English borrowed word, meaning literally like a pie, like a 苹果 pie is an apple pie. So that's the one that John's going to use to remember this. So one of the definitions for this word is pie. In the bathroom of my AI set, Paul McCartney's Pie Factory, that uses his altered family name, Sh, which is the right side, part of the right side component, is having issues because of water shortages. I love it. So I love that Paul McCartney just has a pie factory. I'm not so sure about the altered family name element of this. I mean, this is a silly enough story, but like altered family name, how is that visually showing up? Because we're not supposed to use letters and words here. So that's a bit that I would be a little bit skeptical of, but it's such a silly and fun scene that you're probably going to remember it. And of course, this is once again an example of how it doesn't matter if you don't have all of the definitions of a character understood at any given moment. The fact that you remembered pie, you remembered that one of the meanings is pie, and then you've now remembered the pronunciation, the components, and one of its meanings. When you see it in context later, you're going to know it's pronounced pie, and you're going to see how it fits into a sentence, and you're going to go, oh, here it's clearly in the place of a verb. And this is all unconscious. Your language module will figure this out for you. So you're like, okay, this is clearly a verb. All right, now, so if it's a verb, it doesn't mean pie, as in like apple pie. So what does it mean here? And then you can either get it through the context, or you can learn an alternate meaning at that point. But the point is that the fact that you already had most of it down, the components, the pronunciation, and one of its meanings, means that, and then of course your context that you'll get, means that it's easy to learn at that point secondary and tertiary meanings. You can't learn everything at once. You can't learn everything at once without bringing in context, and or at least it's a fool's errand to try to do so. Final movie scene share for this week. Rick Santos on Make a Movie for Joy, which means to pursue. And it can mean literally pursue, or it can mean pursue like I pursue a lady I'm interested in, for example. And so let's see here. So the top component is the OT, the airport robot, and that's his prop for that component. Outside the entrance of the EI set, the Zhu actress has a fictional actor has a OT that is always on standby alert to seek, track, and pursue at her command anyone on the road. For its fuel, all it needs is just a drop of water from her favorite chaser drink. Joy, suitors beware. Chaser sounds like chase her. Joy. So I like it. Rick is, as usual, getting some of the future meanings involved, and so this is just a great scene all around. Thanks to everybody who gave their submissions this week, and as per usual, you're awesome. You're making great progress. Keep it up. Keep sharing your scenes, sharing your questions and comments, and we'll see you back here next week.